In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where 1,000 civilizations bow to the wisdom of the Galactic Council, there exists one species that refuses to kneel. They call themselves humans, and they have a peculiar obsession with something the Council has long forgotten: justice. When the Council's most trusted ally commits genocide against a defenseless world, the ancient diplomatic machinery grinds into motion, seeking compromise and understanding. But humanity? Humanity sharpens its weapons and asks only one question: how many of our ships do you need to learn that some crimes cannot be forgiven? The galaxy is about to discover why diplomacy evolved in the first place, because the alternative is humanity. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the crystal spires of Nexus Prime, where representatives from across known space gathered in their floating meditation pods. The air itself hummed with translation matrices, converting the thoughts and words of 1,000 different species into comprehensible meaning. Ambassador Zeth Carey of the Vorthan Confederacy floated serenely in her pod, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's soft light into dancing rainbows. Beside her, the gaseous form of Chancellor Mirtok shifted between shades of concerned purple and diplomatic blue. The situation on Kepler 442b has been contained, announced First Counselor Yithandra, her six eyes blinking in synchronized patterns that conveyed both authority and carefully measured regret. While the loss of life was regrettable, we must focus on maintaining galactic stability. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in her pod with the stillness of a predator, her dark eyes fixed on the First Counselor. Unlike the other delegates who floated in various states of relaxation or meditation, Chen remained rigidly upright, her hands folded precisely in her lap. The human delegation was small compared to the massive representations of elder species, but something about their presence made the chamber feel different. 10, sir. Contained, Chen repeated, her voice cutting through the harmonic frequencies of the translation field like a blade through silk. Is that what we're calling the complete annihilation of the Kalani civilization now? Containment? A ripple of discomfort passed through the assembly. The Kalani had been a young species, barely 300 years into their space age, when the Zephyrian Empire had glassed their homeworld from orbit. 47 billion souls had died in a matter of hours, their crime being the discovery of a hyperspace route that the Zephyrians claimed as their ancestral territory. The humans grow emotional again, whispered Counselor Verthak through his species' chemical communication method, releasing a cloud of dismissive pheromones. They lack the wisdom to see the larger picture. Chen's head turned toward Verthak with mechanical precision. I heard that, Counselor. Your translation matrix is leaking. Her smile was sharp enough to cut steel. But, please, enlighten us about this larger picture. 47 billion sentient beings are dead, and the Zephyrian fleet responsible is currently celebrating their victory with a parade through the Andorian Nebula. What exactly are we supposed to see here? First Counselor Yithandra's central eyes focused on Chen while her peripheral ones tracked the mounting tension in the chamber. Ambassador Chen, humanity's recent membership in the Council comes with certain expectations. We have maintained galactic peace for over 10,000 standard years through careful diplomacy and measured responses. The Zephyrian Empire has been our steadfast ally for millennia. Your steadfast ally just committed genocide, Chen said, her voice never rising above conversational volume yet somehow filling the entire chamber. They obliterated an entire species for the crime of existing in the wrong star system. And your response is to schedule a diplomatic hearing for sometime next decade? The First Counselor's chromatic plates shifted to display patient authority. The Council operates on principles of cosmic justice, Ambassador. We must consider all perspectives, review all evidence, and ensure that any response serves the greater good of galactic civilization. Chen stood up in her pod, a simple action that somehow commanded the attention of every being in the chamber. Cosmic justice. She spoke the words like they tasted bitter. Let me tell you about human justice, First Counselor. When someone murders your family, you don't invite them to mediation. You stop them from murdering anyone else's family. Such primitive thinking, Chancellor Mirtok's gaseous form shimmered with condescending amber. This is precisely why younger species require guidance. You see only the immediate, not the cosmic balance. The human ambassador's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture that made several nearby delegates unconsciously float their pods backward. Primitive. Interesting choice of words, Chancellor. Tell me, how many species has humanity wiped from existence since joining this council? None, but how many species has the Zephyrian Empire eliminated in that same timeframe? The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the answer, but no one wanted to voice it. 7, Chen provided helpfully. 7 entire civilizations, including the colony. All deemed necessary for territorial integrity or resource security. And, each time, this council has responded with diplomatic concern and careful deliberation. Each time, you found reasons why genocide was understandable, if regrettable. Ambassador Zethkari's crystalline form chimed with harmonious concern. Ambassador Chen, surely you understand that the Zephyrian Empire's actions, while extreme, stem from legitimate security concerns. The colony discovery of the Hyperion Corridor would have destabilized trade routes affecting billions, so you kill the discoverers instead of sharing the route. Chen's interruption was quiet but absolute. Brilliant solution. Very cosmic. The tension in the chamber had reached a breaking point. Several delegates were communicating through private channels, their concern growing with each exchange. Humanity was still new to galactic politics, barely 50 years since first contact, but their reputation was already troubling. They had a tendency to ask uncomfortable questions and demand uncomfortable answers. First Counselor Yithandra decided to assert control. Ambassador Chen, humanity's youth in galactic affairs is showing. The Council's decisions are based on 10 millennia of experience in maintaining peace among vastly different civilizations. Your species' tendency toward violence, our tendency toward violence? Chen's laugh was like breaking glass. Counselor, in the past 50 years, humanity has engaged in exactly 3 military conflicts. All 3 were to defend species that this council deemed not strategically significant enough for intervention. We fought alongside the Thraxians against the Void Hunters. We stood with the Epsilon Collective when the hegemony tried to enslave them. We bled to protect the sanctuary worlds when pirates thought defenseless refugees were easy targets. She paused, letting the silence stretch. In that same 50-year period, your peaceful Zephyrian allies have exterminated 7 species, enslaved dozens more, and stolen resources from hundreds of systems. But they do it with proper diplomatic protocols and filed environmental impact statements, so that makes it civilized genocide. The first counselor's plates flashed with authority patterns, but Chen continued before she could speak. You want to know what's really primitive, counselor? It's watching evil happen and calling it complex. It's seeing murder and calling it politics. It's standing by while the strong devour the weak because intervention might be inconvenient. She gestured to the great viewing portal where the stars stretched across the void. Out there, right now, the Zephyrian fleet is moving toward the Helix sector. Intelligence suggests they've identified another territorial dispute to resolve. The Minari Collective has no idea what's coming. 60 billion people going about their lives, completely unaware that a diplomatic solution to their existence is being discussed in committee. A new voice entered the conversation, resonating from the shadows at the back of the chamber. Perhaps the humans require education in the subtleties of galactic governance. Ambassador Chen turned toward the speaker, and, for the first time, genuine emotion crossed her features. Not fear, but something far more dangerous, recognition. The speaker was War Master Kyxthol of the Zephyrian Empire, his massive form encased in ceremonial battle armor that gleamed like oil in the chamber's light. His forearms were spread in a gesture of false magnanimity, but his predatory smile showed rows of teeth evolved for tearing apart prey. War Master, Chen said, inclining her head in what might have been respect or might have been a targeting assessment. How convenient that you're here. I was just telling the council about your latest diplomatic triumph. Kyxthol's smile widened. The colony situation was unfortunate but necessary. They had discovered technology beyond their wisdom to use responsibly. We acted to prevent a greater catastrophe. 47 billion people would disagree, but they're rather busy being dead. Young species often lack perspective, the War Master replied, his voice carrying the casual certainty of absolute power. This is why the Council exists. To provide guidance. To prevent the chaos that comes when every primitive species believes their local concerns supersede galactic stability. Chen nodded thoughtfully. I see. And if humanity decides that genocide is a local concern that supersedes our respect for council authority? The chamber erupted in alarmed chatter, translation matrices struggling to keep up with the sudden flood of concerned communication. Several delegates immediately began private conversations with their respective governments, while others called for order. Ambassador. First Counselor Yithandra's voice cut through the chaos. Are you threatening council member species? I'm asking a question, Counselor. A simple one. Chen's voice remained perfectly calm. The council's authority rests on the consent of its members. If that consent is withdrawn, what exactly stops humanity from taking direct action? War Master KYX stepped forward, his massive frame radiating menace. You forget yourself, human. The Zephyrian Empire has protected galactic civilization for longer than your species has known fire. We have ships that could turn your worlds to glass before you could mount a response. Is that a threat, War Master? It is a fact. The human ambassador smiled, and, suddenly, every being in the chamber understood why humanity's arrival in galactic politics had been met with such unease. There was something in that smile that spoke of starlight on nuclear fire, of the darkness between worlds where predators learn to hunt. War Master KYX, I'd like you to meet someone. She activated a holographic projector, and the image of another human appeared beside her. This one wore a different uniform, military rather than diplomatic, and her expression suggested she had been born knowing things that would make angels weep. This is Admiral Sarah Chen. My sister. The hologram spoke in the same quiet voice as the ambassador. War Master, humanity received word of the Kalani genocide approximately 6 hours ago. Since that time, the human defense fleet has repositioned assets throughout local space. We currently have 17 dreadnoughts, 43 heavy cruisers, and approximately 200 support vessels distributed across 11 star systems. The chamber fell dead silent. The interesting thing about human military doctrine, War Master, is that we don't believe in proportional response. We believe in absolute response. You blast one of our worlds, we glass all of yours. You commit genocide against our allies, we remove your capacity to commit genocide against anyone. First Counselor Yithandra's plates flashed emergency patterns. Admiral Chen, Admiral. The Council has not authorized military action. You are in violation of the Council, Ambassador Chen said quietly, has had 50 years to demonstrate that its authority deserves respect. Today, you had the opportunity to demand justice for 47 billion murdered souls. Instead, you chose to protect their murderers. She stood and gathered her materials with practiced efficiency. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We will no longer pretend that diplomatic process is more important than justice. We will no longer stand by while evil hides behind procedure. The chamber exploded into chaos as delegates began shouting in hundreds of languages, their translation matrices overloading. Emergency protocols activated as various species demanded immediate consultation with their governments. Over the din, Ambassador Chen's voice carried with absolute clarity, you wanted diplomacy, counselors. But, diplomacy without justice is just elaborate surrender. Humanity chooses a different path. As she walked toward the exit, her final words echoed through the chamber, the Minari Collective will not share the Kalani's fate. Neither will any other species capable of standing against genocide. The human defense fleet will see to that. The great doors of the council chamber closed behind her with a sound like the ending of ages. In the silence that followed, First Counselor Yithandra's central eyes fixed on the holographic admiral who still stood beside the empty podium. Admiral Chen, she said, her voice carrying 10,000 years of diplomatic authority, the council orders you to stand down your fleet immediately. Admiral Chen's hologram smiled with the same terrible certainty as her sister. First Counselor, she said, humanity doesn't take orders from accomplices to genocide. We'll be in touch when you've decided whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem. The hologram faded, leaving the council alone with their fear and the growing certainty that the galaxy they had governed for 10 millennia was about to change forever. 3 days after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the universe held its breath. Trade routes shifted as merchant vessels rerouted around human space, uncertain whether the formerly diplomatic species would honor existing treaties. Ambassadors from a dozen civilizations requested emergency audiences with Earth's representatives, while others began quietly reinforcing their borders. On the bridge of the human dreadnought Righteous Fury, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before a tactical display that showed the disposition of forces across 17 star systems. The holographic representation painted space in colors of war: red markers for Zephyrian positions, blue for human ships, yellow for neutral vessels caught between opposing forces. "Admiral," reported Captain Torres from the navigation station, his voice carrying the tension that had gripped every human ship since the council session. "Long-range sensors are picking up Zephyrian fleet movements in the Helix sector. Looks like Warmaster KYXthal wasn't bluffing about the Minari." Admiral Chen studied the tactical display with the focused intensity of someone who had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. Unlike her diplomat sister, Sarah Chen had never believed that words could stop bullets or that negotiations could prevent genocide. She had watched 7 species die while the Galactic Council debated proper procedures, and she had sworn that number would never reach 8. How long until the Zephyrian vanguard reaches Minari space? 18 hours at their current velocity, Admiral. And our response time? The task force can reach the Minari homeworld in 14 hours if we push the quantum drives past safety margins. Admiral Chen nodded, her expression showing no concern for safety margins when entire civilizations hung in the balance. "Signal the fleet. All ships, maximum burn. Time is more important than hull integrity right now." As the orders flashed across the communication network, every human vessel in local space adjusted course toward the Helix sector. The quantum drives that had made humanity's rapid expansion possible now served a different purpose: delivering justice at light speed to those who thought themselves beyond its reach. On Nexus Prime, the emergency session of the Galactic Council had been in continuous session for 3 days. The elegant chamber that had housed 10 millennia of careful deliberation now buzzed with barely controlled panic as representatives struggled to process humanity's unprecedented action. First Counselor Yathandra found herself facing a crisis that no amount of diplomatic training had prepared her for. The humans had not simply withdrawn from the council, they had rejected the entire foundation of galactic governance. Worse, they possessed the military capability to back up their rejection. "The human fleet movements represent a clear threat to galactic stability," announced Counselor Verthak, his chemical emissions carrying notes of barely controlled fear. "They must be stopped before they destabilize the entire sector." Ambassador Zethkari's crystalline form chimed with nervous harmonics. "Perhaps we should consider economic sanctions. Humanity depends on galactic trade networks for several key resources." "Sanctions," repeated Chancellor Mirtok, his gaseous form shifting through agitated color patterns. "Against a species that has just demonstrated its willingness to use military force? They'll simply take what they need." The debate might have continued for days, following the Council's traditional pattern of endless discussion, but it was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. The Chamber's security protocols activated as a new presence entered without permission or announcement. The figure that materialized in the center of the chamber was neither human nor any known Council species. It appeared to be composed of shifting starlight, its form barely contained within the rough approximation of humanoid shape. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that bypassed the translation matrices entirely, speaking directly to the consciousness of every being present. "I am Observer Null 7 Prime of the Witness Collective," it announced, its form pulsing with energies that made the chamber's advanced sensors scream in alarm. "We have monitored this galaxy's development for 3 million standard years. We come now because the pattern has changed." First Counselor Yathandra found her voice despite the cosmic entity's overwhelming presence. "Observer, the Witness Collective has maintained neutrality for eons. Why do you appear now?" "Because something new has entered galactic politics," Null 7 Prime replied, its starlight form shifting to focus on the empty space where the human delegation had sat. For 10,000 years, this council has maintained what you call peace through the simple expedient of allowing the strong to consume the weak while maintaining the fiction of justice. This pattern has been stable, predictable, ultimately futile but functionally harmless. The observer's form brightened, casting shadows that seemed to move independently of its light. The humans have introduced a new variable. They choose violence not from hatred or conquest, but from principle. They reject stability for justice. This is unprecedented. You speak as if this were significant, Warmaster KYX interjected, his massive form radiating confident aggression. Humanity is young and small. Their fleet may be advanced, but they lack the industrial capacity for extended conflict. The Zephyrian Empire will crush their rebellion and restore proper order. Observer Null 7 Prime turned its attention to the Warmaster, and something in its regard made the chamber temperature drop noticeably. Warmaster KYX of the Zephyrian Empire. Your species has eliminated 47 civilizations during our observation period. You have perfected the art of genocide as administrative function. Tell us, what is your assessment of humanity's military capabilities? The Warmaster's confidence never wavered. They possess perhaps 200 capital ships, scattered across their territory. My empire commands over 3,000 vessels of the line, supported by orbital fortifications in 100 systems. The mathematics of warfare favor overwhelming superiority. Indeed. And, yet, you seem concerned about their recent deployment. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed the Warmaster's features. Any military movement requires appropriate response. I take no unnecessary risks. Of course. The observer's form pulsed with what might have been amusement. Tell us, Warmaster, what do your intelligence networks report about humanity's industrial capacity? Their shipbuilding capabilities are modest. Perhaps one dreadnought every 6 standard months. Their technology, while advanced in some areas, cannot match our accumulated advantages. Your intelligence is incorrect. The simple statement hung in the chamber like a death sentence. Humanity, Observer Null 7 Prime continued, has spent 50 years not building a fleet, but building the capacity to build fleets. Their orbital manufacturing platforms can construct a dreadnought in 18 standard days. They currently have the industrial capacity to produce more warships in 1 year than the Zephyrian Empire has built in the past century. The chamber erupted in alarmed chatter as delegates processed the implications. If the observer was correct, then humanity's modest fleet represented not their military strength but their restraint. More significantly, the observer continued, humanity has spent those same 50 years studying the military doctrines of every spacefaring species in this galaxy. They know your tactics, your technologies, your weaknesses. You, meanwhile, know nothing of theirs because they have never used them. Warmaster KYX 4 hands moved unconsciously toward his ceremonial weapons. Impossible. Our intelligence networks are the finest in the galaxy. Your networks observe what humans allow you to observe. Did you know, for instance, that every human vessel carries weapons systems specifically designed to counter Zephyrian defensive capabilities? Did you know that human quantum torpedoes are programmed with the exact resonance frequencies needed to collapse Zephyrian void shields? The silence that followed was absolute. The humans have prepared for war against every major species in this galaxy, Observer Null 7 Prime explained with clinical precision. Not from aggression, but from pragmatism. They studied your histories, observed your methods, and concluded that eventually, they would need to fight you all. They have spent 5 decades preparing for today. First Counselor Yithandra's plates displayed emergency distress patterns. Observer, surely the humans cannot intend to wage war against the entire galaxy. Not against the galaxy, the observer corrected. Against specific species that engage in systematic elimination of other species. They have compiled what they call a justice list. Civilizations whose crimes against other sentient beings warrant military response. And how many species are on this list? Chancellor Mirtok asked, his gaseous form cycling through nauseated colors. The observer's starlight form pulsed once, brilliantly. Every member of the Galactic Council except 3. The chamber's life support systems struggled to maintain atmospheric pressure as dozens of species began hyperventilating simultaneously. The three exceptions, the observer continued remorselessly, are species that have never engaged in genocide, slavery, or systematic oppression of other civilizations. Interestingly, all three are considered minor powers by current Council standards. Ambassador Zethkari's crystalline form vibrated with terror harmonics. The humans mean to destroy galactic civilization itself. No, Observer Null 7 Prime replied. They mean to replace it with something they consider just. Meanwhile, in the depths of space between stars, the human defense fleet executed the largest military maneuver in their species' history. 17 dreadnoughts, 43 heavy cruisers, and 200 support vessels moved through quantum space with the coordination of a single organism. Each ship carried not just advanced weapons and defenses, but the accumulated knowledge of 50 years of careful planning. On the bridge of the Righteous Fury, Admiral Sarah Chen received a priority communication from the Minari Collective's government. The alien faces on the screen showed the peculiar mixture of hope and desperation that characterized species facing extinction. Admiral Chen spoke Prime Minister Yeth Mari of the Minari, her translator rendering her musical language into crisp English. Our long-range sensors have detected the Zephyrian fleet. They will arrive in our space within 12 hours. We have contacted the Galactic Council, but they have advised us to seek diplomatic resolution. Prime Minister, Admiral Chen replied, her voice carrying the absolute certainty that had made her sister such an effective diplomat. Diplomatic resolution with genocidal species is called surrender. Humanity offers an alternative. Our military capabilities are limited, Admiral. We cannot meaningfully contribute to our own defense. You don't need to. Humanity is not asking for alliance or tribute. We're offering justice. Free of charge, no strings attached. The Prime Minister's alien features showed confusion at concepts that had no equivalent in galactic politics. Admiral, forgive our ignorance, but we do not understand. What does humanity gain from defending us? Admiral Chen smiled, and, for a moment, she looked exactly like her diplomat sister. Prime Minister, humanity gains the knowledge that when we look at the stars, we see civilizations full of people living their lives instead of graveyards full of ghosts. That's enough. As the communication ended, the Admiral turned her attention back to the tactical display. The Zephyrian fleet was moving in standard attack formation, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea that their quantum signatures had been tracked for days, their deployment patterns analyzed, their weaknesses catalogued and cross-referenced with human weapon systems. Captain Torres, Admiral Chen said quietly, signal the fleet. Execute Operation Righteous Dawn in T-4 hours. All ships are cleared to engage. Admiral, Torres replied, then paused. Ma'am, once we fire the first shot, there's no going back. The galaxy will never be the same. Admiral Chen nodded, her expression reflecting the weight of history. Captain, the galaxy hasn't been the same since 47 billion Kalani died while the Council debated proper procedure. We're not changing the galaxy. We're just making sure everyone else realizes it's already changed. As the human defense fleet adjusted course for their final approach to Minari space, a new chapter in galactic history began to write itself in the silent darkness between the stars. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had known a kind of peace built on the quiet acceptance of necessary evils. In 12 hours, that peace would end, and something far more dangerous would take its place: justice, delivered by a species that had never learned to compromise with monsters. The Battle of Minari Prime lasted exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds. War Master KYX Thal had positioned his fleet in perfect textbook formation, 3,000 vessels arranged in the classical Zephyrian battle array that had conquered 47 civilizations. His dreadnoughts formed the central hammer, heavy cruisers provided flanking support, and destroyer screens protected against torpedo attacks. It was a formation refined over millennia of warfare, proven against every conceivable tactical scenario. It was also exactly what humanity had expected. The human defense fleet emerged from quantum space not in front of the Zephyrian formation, where conventional tactics dictated, but above and below it, in a three-dimensional envelopment that no species had ever attempted at fleet scale. The mathematics of such a maneuver should have been impossible, requiring coordination and timing beyond the capability of organic minds.
Admiral Sarah Chen had never relied solely on organic minds.
Athena Online reported the ship's artificial intelligence, its voice carrying the cold precision of humanity's finest military technology.
All fleet units synchronized. Tactical analysis complete. Enemy void shields operating on predicted frequencies. Quantum torpedo guidance systems locked onto primary targets.
Execute, Admiral Chen said simply. What followed redefined warfare for every species watching through long-range sensors. The human ships moved with mechanical precision, their quantum torpedoes finding gaps in Zephyrian defenses that shouldn't have existed, their particle beams striking at resonance frequencies that turned energy shields into conductors of their own destruction. Each human vessel fought not as an individual unit but as a component of a single vast organism, sharing sensor data and tactical information at light speed. The Zephyrian fleet, masters of galactic warfare for 3 millennia, found themselves fighting an enemy that knew their every weakness while revealing none of its own.
Impossible. Warmaster KYX Thul roared as his flagship's shields collapsed under precisely targeted fire.
Their technology cannot be this advanced. Intelligence reported primitive propulsion systems. His tactical officer's forearms worked frantically over the control surfaces, trying to coordinate a defense against an attack that came from all directions simultaneously. Warmaster, our quantum scramblers are ineffective. Their communication systems are operating on principles our sensors cannot even detect.
Then, jam everything. Electromagnetic spectrum, subspace, quantum foam. Nothing gets through.
Warmaster, their ships are still coordinating perfectly. Whatever technology they're using, it's beyond our understanding.
On the bridge of the Righteous Fury, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with professional satisfaction.
50 years of preparation was bearing fruit as Zephyrian vessels died with mechanical efficiency. Each explosion represented not just tactical victory but justice delayed finally delivered. Athena, casualty report.
Human losses, 0 vessels destroyed, minimal damage to outer hulls from defensive fire.
Zephyrian losses, 47% of fleet strength eliminated, remaining vessels attempting retreat maneuvers. The same percentage as Kalani civilian casualties, Admiral Chen noted with grim satisfaction.
Cancel their retreat. No survivors return to Zephyrian space to report human capabilities. This ends here.
The artificial intelligence paused for exactly 0.003 seconds, processing moral parameters that had been programmed by beings who understood the difference between justice and vengeance. Admiral, the retreating vessels no longer pose a threat to Minari space.
Rules of engagement suggest Athena, those ships are crewed by personnel who participated in 7 genocides.
Their existence is incompatible with galactic justice.
Eliminate all targets. Acknowledged, Admiral. Adjusting targeting priorities.
The destruction of the Zephyrian fleet was broadcast live across the galaxy through automated sensor networks that no one had remembered to disable. On 1,000 worlds, in the halls of power and the meeting chambers of species who had grown comfortable with the old order, beings watched the impossible happen. The masters of galactic warfare were dying like insects against humanity's clinical precision. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as their most powerful military ally was systematically annihilated. The elegant chamber that had housed 10 millennia of diplomatic discourse now felt like a tomb, its carefully maintained atmosphere of civilized discourse shattered by the reality of absolute military defeat. 3,000 ships, whispered Chancellor Mirtok, his gaseous form cycling through colors that had no names in any language.
The greatest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Gone.
Observer Null 7 Prime remained in the center of the chamber, its starlight form pulsing with what might have been satisfaction.
The pattern completion proceeds as predicted.
Humanity has demonstrated that technological superiority trumps traditional military doctrine when combined with absolute strategic commitment. First Counselor Yithandra's 6 eyes tracked the tactical display with growing horror.
Observer, this cannot be allowed to continue. The humans are destroying galactic stability.
Counselor, stability built on accepting genocide as administrative necessity was never stable. It was merely convenient for those who benefited from the arrangement. The Chamber's emergency communication system activated, carrying signals from across known space. Reports flooded in of human fleet movements in a dozen star systems, targeting installations and vessels belonging to every species on their justice list. The careful diplomatic balance that had maintained galactic peace for 10,000 years was collapsing in real time. "They're everywhere," reported Counselor Verthak, his chemical emissions carrying pure panic.
"Human fleets have appeared in our core systems.
They're demanding surrender of all military vessels and immediate cessation of slavery operations. My species has practiced indentured servitude for millennia," protested Ambassador Crethon of the Hegemony, his biomechanical form clicking with agitation.
"It is a fundamental component of our civilization." Observer Null 7 Prime turned its attention to the Hegemony representative. "Ambassador Crethon, your species has enslaved 47 billion sentient beings across the past century.
Humanity appears to find this incompatible with their definition of justice.
But the economic implications, the social disruption. You cannot simply eliminate entire social systems overnight."
"Tell that to the species whose civilizations were eliminated overnight for the convenience of your social systems," the observer replied with cosmic indifference.
Meanwhile, in orbit above Minari Prime, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching the debris field that had once been the galaxy's most feared fleet.
The wreckage drifted in lazy patterns around the blue-green world below, where 60 billion Minari continued their lives in blissful ignorance of how close they had come to extinction. Captain Torres joined her at the viewing port, his expression mixing awe with uncertainty.
"Admiral, we're receiving surrender transmissions from Zephyrian colonies across 17 star systems.
Their entire military command structure is requesting terms." "There are no terms, Captain. Species that commit genocide don't get to negotiate the consequences."
"Signal the follow-up fleets, all Zephyrian military assets are to be destroyed, all weapons of mass destruction are to be secured, and all governmental officials involved in genocide orders are to be arrested for trial by their victims. Admiral."
Torres paused, choosing his words carefully.
"Some of the colonial governments are offering to release enslaved populations in exchange for clemency."
Admiral Chen turned from the viewing port, her expression carrying the cold certainty that had characterized her sister's diplomatic career. "Captain, species that keep slaves don't get to bargain with their slaves' lives.
They release their victims because it's right, not because it's convenient. Make that clear in your response."
As the human defense fleet began the systematic occupation of Zephyrian space, similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human vessels appeared in star systems that had never seen warfare, their arrival announced not by demands for tribute or territorial concessions but by simple ultimatums: cease all genocidal activities, release all enslaved populations, and submit to trials for crimes against sentient life.
The galaxy's response was swift and predictable.
Ancient alliances activated, mutual defense treaties were invoked, and emergency military coalitions formed to resist what many species saw as humanity's attempt at galactic conquest. The irony was lost on most observers that civilizations which had never cooperated to prevent genocide suddenly found unprecedented unity in opposing justice. The coalition of free systems, led by the surviving council members, assembled a fleet of 12,000 vessels in the Nexus cluster. It was the largest military force ever gathered in galactic history, representing the combined might of 47 spacefaring civilizations. Their stated goal was the restoration of galactic stability through the elimination of the human threat. Admiral Chan received the intelligence reports on the coalition fleet while reviewing the final casualty figures from Minari Prime. 0 human losses, 3,000 Zephyrian vessels destroyed, and an entire civilization saved from extinction. The mathematics of justice, she reflected, were surprisingly simple when you weren't trying to negotiate with monsters. "Admiral," reported her communication officer, "we're receiving a message from the coalition fleet. They're demanding our immediate withdrawal from occupied territories and our surrender for war crimes against galactic peace."
Admiral Chen laughed, the sound echoing across her bridge with genuine amusement. "War crimes against galactic peace.
That's rich, coming from species whose idea of peace was pretending genocide didn't happen as long as it was properly documented. She activated the fleet-wide communication system, her image appearing on every human vessel across 17 star systems.
All ships, all personnel. The galaxy has made its choice.
47 civilizations have united not to prevent genocide, but to preserve their right to commit it. They have assembled 12,000 vessels to restore what they call galactic stability. Her expression hardened into something that would have made her diplomat sister proud.
They still don't understand. We're not trying to conquer the galaxy. We're trying to save it. From them.
The Admiral turned to her tactical display, where new markers indicated the positions of human fleets throughout known space. Red indicators showed coalition forces, blue showed human vessels, and green marked the systems where enslaved populations awaited liberation.
Signal the Fleet Admiral. Execute Operation Final Justice. All targets, all systems, simultaneous engagement. Show them what 50 years of preparation actually looks like.
As her orders flashed across the galactic communication network, Admiral Sarah Chen reflected on the conversation she'd had with her diplomat sister before the fleet deployment. Ambassador Chen had asked whether humanity was ready to become the galaxy's police force, whether they had the right to impose their justice on civilizations that had existed for millennia.
The Admiral's response had been simple: someone had to do it.
The Battle of Nexus Cluster began 6 hours later, as 12,000 coalition vessels faced 17 human dreadnoughts and their escorts. Military analysts across the galaxy predicted that humanity's technological advantages could not overcome such overwhelming numerical superiority. They assumed that even the most advanced weapons and tactics had limits when facing odds of nearly 1,000 to 1.
They were wrong.
The human fleet didn't engage the coalition directly. Instead, they demonstrated a capability that no species had even theoretical knowledge of: instantaneous galactic-scale teleportation. One moment the coalition fleet faced 17 human ships. The next moment, they faced 17,000, as every human vessel in existence appeared simultaneously in the Nexus cluster. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity revealed their true military capability. Not 200 ships, but 20,000. Not modest industrial capacity, but the ability to construct entire fleets in parallel across dozens of hidden shipyards. Not 50 years of restrained defense, but 50 years of preparing for the war they knew would come. As coalition vessels died by the thousands under precisely coordinated human fire, Observer Null 7 Prime materialized on the bridge of the Righteous Fury, its starlight form brightening the Admiral's command center.
Admiral Chen, it spoke directly into her consciousness, bypassing her communication systems entirely.
The Witness Collective has observed the rise and fall of 3,000 galactic civilizations.
We have never seen anything like humanity.
Admiral Chen didn't look away from her tactical display, where the coalition fleet was being systematically destroyed.
Observer, what makes us different?
Every species we have observed chooses between justice and survival.
Faced with overwhelming opposition, they compromise their principles to preserve their existence.
Humanity appears to have chosen justice even when it guarantees conflict with the entire galaxy.
Observer, Admiral Chen replied, watching as the last coalition vessel surrendered: survival without justice isn't survival. It's just delayed extinction. We chose to live as human beings rather than die as civilized monsters.
3 hours later, the Battle of Nexus Cluster ended with the complete destruction or surrender of the coalition fleet. Across the galaxy, the remaining military forces of 47 civilizations laid down their arms rather than face humanity's demonstrated military supremacy. The age of galactic governance through diplomatic convenience was over. The new age began with trials. On worlds across known space, human tribunals began the systematic prosecution of individuals responsible for genocide, slavery, and other crimes against sentient life. The defendants included government officials, military officers, and anyone who had participated in or enabled the systematic elimination of other species. The trials were scrupulously fair, conducted with legal standards that most galactic civilizations had never bothered to develop. Evidence was reviewed meticulously, defendants were provided with competent representation, and verdicts were based on objective standards of justice rather than political convenience. The guilty were punished. The innocent were protected. For the first time in galactic history, justice was applied equally regardless of species, political power, or economic influence.
1 year later, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the rebuilt Galactic Council in the same chamber where humanity had withdrawn from galactic politics.
The chamber looked the same, but everything else had changed. The floating pods now held representatives from civilizations that had survived humanity's justice, along with delegates from species that had been liberated from slavery or saved from extinction. The Human Confederation submits the following proposal for galactic governance, Ambassador Chen announced, her voice carrying across the chamber with the same quiet authority her sister had wielded.
All sentient species shall have the right to exist free from extinction, enslavement, or systematic oppression.
All civilizations shall have representation in galactic governance proportional to their population rather than their military power.
All disputes shall be resolved through objective legal standards rather than political convenience.
She paused, looking around the chamber at beings who had learned to see humanity not as conquerors but as liberators.
This council is invited to serve as humanity's partner in maintaining galactic justice. You are not required to accept this partnership.
But, you are required to accept that justice will be maintained, with or without your cooperation. First Counselor Yathandra, one of only 3 original council members to survive humanity's justice trials, raised her hand in acknowledgement.
Ambassador Chen, the reformed Galactic Council accepts humanity's proposal.
We pledge to serve justice rather than convenience, truth rather than stability, and the rights of all sentient beings rather than the privileges of the powerful.
Ambassador Chen smiled, the same expression that had once terrified diplomats and now offered hope to civilizations across the galaxy. Counselor, humanity looks forward to working with you.
Together, we will build something the galaxy has never known, a civilization based on justice rather than fear. As the session ended and representatives from across known space began the work of building a just galactic order, Observer Null 7 Prime materialized one final time in the empty chamber. Pattern completion confirmed, it spoke to the empty air, its starlight form pulsing with satisfaction. The galaxy has evolved beyond the cycle of systematic oppression.
The Witness Collective's observation period is concluded.
It paused, considering the remarkable species that had accomplished what 3 million years of observation had suggested was impossible. Humanity, it concluded, has proven that sometimes the young can teach the old.
Justice, it seems, is not naive idealism but practical necessity. We will remember this lesson.
The Observer faded from existence, leaving the galaxy to its new guardians, a species that had looked at 10,000 years of diplomatic compromise with evil and decided that some things were worth fighting for.
The Council had wanted diplomacy. Humanity had wanted justice. In the end, justice won.